Hey everyone, welcome to another bonus video. This is the one that I said I was debating on doing, and I do want to do it. I regret not doing this before the season started, so I do apologize for that. But I did want to get that out there, and a lot of people have asked me, why am I playing the fantasy game, which is the logo at the bottom and not the one above? I first of all do want to say that the one on top, Serie Fantasy, I think it's newer and does have a bit more of a following right now. I believe it's in like the 30,000s. I believe Fantalive is approaching 10,000, which is more than I had last year too. So both seem to have grown. Um, but a lot of people call the top one Serie Fantasy the official one. I do not believe it is officially affiliated with Serie. You feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. That's what I gather from it. But yeah, a lot of people have been asking me why I'm not doing that one. And I just wanted to explain not only why, but the differences between the two. Um, and if you appreciate this kind of video, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. And we'll be getting the team selection video tomorrow. Um, anyway, so we'll start with, I kind of started doing fantasy starting with the Premier League game because that's the most popular one in the world, and that's where a lot of my friends were playing, and that's kind of how I got into it. And then I was like, no, I want to do fantasy with the league that I most enjoy, where the team I support is, which is Juventus. So I wanted to do an Italian Serie. I searched it up, and this is one of the best ones that I found that kind of emulates the Premier League one. It almost has all the same rules. It has the same point scheme for the most part, maybe a couple 1-2 point differences. The main differences between them is there's a couple things that in the Premier League would count as an assist that wouldn't in the Serie A fantasy. They do have chips, but they're a little bit different. They do have the same kind of idea as the bench boost with the all-in chip, but they instead of a triple captain, they have a double captain. And they have the two wild cards, which is kind of consistent. But that's kind of it. Like the pricing kind of works the same, how they're either ending in 0 or 0.5s, and now the prices are changing. You can only bank a maximum of 2 free transfers, or you -4. So it really aligns with how the Premier League does theirs for the most part. And I really like and I'm comfortable with that system, which is why I've chosen to be doing this one the last 2 seasons. So I'll go into some of the differences and why I either do or do not like how Serie A fantasy runs in comparison. So, for instance, one of the first things is, and this is actually something that I kind of do like, is that you can bank up to 4 free transfers. And what that means is if you do not make a transfer in a week, you gather another free transfer. As we know, if you paid transfers cost you 4 points that you've accumulated throughout the season. So that's kind of cool that you can bank that. And if you bank all 4, you're almost like gaining a wild card at that point, depending on how many changes you generally make in your wild card. That one of the things I really don't like is you can only have up to 2 players per team. So you can't even have a forward, midfielder, and defender per team. You can only have a maximum of 2. So try picking just 2 Inter, 2 Milan, or 2 Juventus players. Like that's really difficult. And I guess that can lead to some variation, but also just it could also lead to a lot of the teams just looking the same. Obviously, if you're picking players from Juventus, you're probably starting out with Vlahovic, and then you only got one more, and it's hard to differentiate from there. For AC Milan, you're probably picking Theo Hernandez and then only one more, or Inter, you probably got Lukaku, and so on and so forth. So I like being able to pick 3 players from each team, and then obviously you don't have to, but 2 really limits what you can pick. One thing that I find kind of silly is halftime clean sheets in Serie A fantasy. You get clean sheets per half rather than for the whole game. I just don't consider it a clean sheet unless you're going 90 minutes without getting scored on. That's just my mentality of it. So some people would probably be okay with it. It's interesting, but you get clean sheet points based on per half in the Serie A fantasy rather than Fantalive. So I'm not a big fan of it, but I could get used to it, I guess. Another difference is there's no bonus point system. So in Premier League and in Fantalive, they have the bonus point system, which takes a bunch more advanced stats kind of from behind the scenes that aren't just goals and assists. And it's almost like giving like a player of the game where 3 players are awarded points at the end, 3 for the person with the best stats, 2 for second, 1 for last, obviously. And I really like that kind of little addition. It gives some players that might not get assists or stuff a little bit more value. And they don't have that system as far as I know for the Serie A fantasy. Serie A fantasy doesn't have any chips aside from the wild card. I actually forget if it's one or two. Oh, it's likely two for the wild card. But they don't have a triple captain or double captain or bench boost or anything like that. It's just the wild card, which again is fine. It's just one thing taken away from the game. One thing that I found weird is they kind of had weird price points. So it's not just the 0.0 and then the 0.5s. They have like 0.2s, 0.3s, 0.4s, 0.5, whatever, 0.8s. And so it's just really funky, which allows you to separate players like that. Maybe it's something that I like. I don't know. I'm kind of undecided on that. Like sometimes it's too much of a variance to put players by 0.5 separated. Like one, you don't want to undervalue them and make it obvious to pick one over the other, but they're not really the same caliber at the same time. So this allows for that a little bit. So that's kind of cool. It just makes for transferring players a little more awkward, I guess. And these players' prices don't change or increase as far as I can tell. So that's one thing that's kind of crappy is you could get people having the same team by the end of things because people's team values will not have changed at all. And I think, oh, and the last thing is one thing that I really don't like is the substitutions and how they work is they can only sub in for a direct player of that same position. So for example, if you play a 4-4-3 and or yeah, let's say 4-4-3 and one of your midfield or your strikers don't play. 4-3-3, that's right. And one of your strikers don't play, one of your defenders can't come in for a striker that doesn't play, and you will have no more strikers on the bench. Whereas Fantalive will make the substitutions as long as it makes sense to an actual formation that's part of the game. So a midfielder can come in for a defender if a defender doesn't play, and it's based on your bench priority as well. So I just don't like the way the subbing process works for Serie A fantasy. So there are a couple things in that I don't like. It could just be my comfortability with Fantasy Premier League and how I like that it's almost a direct comparison. So the strategy is not too different. I have made a Serie A fantasy team as well. I really won't be commenting on it this season. But if it does prove that the following is much greater in the direction of the Serie A fantasy, it's much more modern looking, I'd say as well. It does look like a great and well-run site. But I may make the switch over next season. But for this season, I will be sticking with Fantalive. And I just want to tell you some of the differences and just for a kind of once and for all explanation as to why I didn't make the switch this year. But again, based on the following, I might make that switch next year. So I hope that's fair enough. I hope the information that I provide, well, if I'm talking about prices and stuff, it might differ a little bit, but I hope mostly my information is still helpful if you're a player of Serie A fantasy rather than Fantalive. And we're only one game week in. Don't feel afraid to play both still and start it up. Sometimes starting game week 2 can be beneficial because yes, you're a whole game week of points behind, but you have information making your team at the very start. It's almost like a wild card with information, but you just have to start at 0 instead. So feel free to start either one. You can still join my league in Fantalive. And please don't forget to like and subscribe. And I hope you found this video a little bit helpful. May not be the one that you've maybe watched the end, although if you are watching the end, I appreciate it. But anyway, we'll get to team selection tomorrow, back to the stuff that you're more used to. Take care. Have a good day.